This hearing will come to order. As this hearing is fully virtual, we must address a few housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition for the purposes of eliminating inadvertent background noise. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. If I notice that you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask you if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate approval by nodding, staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. If there is a technology issue, we will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time. You will notice a clock on your screen that will show how much time is remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. At 30 seconds, I will gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time is almost expired. When your time has expired, the clock will turn red, and I will begin to recognize the next member. In terms of speaking order, we will begin with the chair and ranking member. Then members present at the time the hearing is called to order will be recognized in order of seniority. And finally, members not present at the time the hearing is called to order. Finally, the House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any time of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. Let me just see this here. Okay, with that, first of all, I'm going to acknowledge Ranking Member Cole, but we are all going to wish Ranking Member Cole a happy birthday. So happy birthday, Tom. I was going to suggest that we all sing, but we may spare you of that. And in addition to which, I would say probably everyone would say, keep your day job and don't get into a cappella singing here. So, but a very, very warm wishes to you, Tom, for your birthday, obviously from all of us. So I want to say a thank you to our colleagues for joining this morning. And we want to welcome Secretary Walsh. It is really great to have you join our subcommittee for the very first time today. Today, April 28th, in addition to being Tom Cole's birthday, is Workers' Memorial Day, a day to honor the over 5,000 working people who die on the job in the United States each year. Today is also the 50th anniversary of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, which has helped to transform America's workplaces and significantly reduced workplace fatalities, injuries, and illnesses. I'm especially grateful that today we have Secretary Walsh with us to discuss how the Biden administration is helping to keep our nation's workers healthy and safe. Secretary Walsh, I especially appreciate how your experiences as the son of Irish immigrants who has faced his fair share of hardships qualifies you as a particularly powerful voice in this discussion. Like you, I also have an immigrant heritage. I often tell the story of how my Italian-American mother worked in the old sweatshops and how my friend's mother was one of the 15 people who died in the Franklin Street fire, a fire just down the street from my home when I was barely a teenager. It is impossible to be an eyewitness to events like that, to witness the struggle of hardworking families and not be touched by the gravity of our responsibility to one another, which is why I've long dedicated myself to fighting for workers' rights and workplace safety laws so that every American can achieve the American dream. But while our Irish and Italian communities have now largely worked their way into the middle class, many communities today still face continuing obstacles, such as racial inequities and discrimination, that make the path to the middle class more difficult. That is why I look forward to working together with you to help open the American dream to all Americans. As the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated our economy and workforce, Americans across the country are struggling to make ends meet. In April 2020, last year, the unemployment rate in this country peaked at 14.8%, the highest since the Department of Labor began collecting this data in 1948. Meanwhile, the long-term unemployment rate, the percentage of people who continue to remain unemployed for 27 weeks or more, has increased almost fourfold, from 1.2 million in March 2020 to 4.2 million in March 2021. And while we have seen a considerable decrease in overall unemployment over the past year, over 143,000 Connecticut residents are still without jobs. And as I have said before, we know that women and people of color have been disproportionately affected. For example, there are about 3.7 million fewer women working now than in February last year. And to be clear, these women are not opting out of the workforce. They are being pushed out by inadequate policies. Challenges like access to childcare, workplace flexibility are still making it much more difficult for women to reclaim the jobs they lost. Many have been forced to consider new careers because the jobs they had prior to the pandemic no longer exist. That is why I am so encouraged that you and President Biden have made it a priority to invest in American jobs. And that means investing in workforce development, including sector-based training, apprenticeship programs, partnerships between institutions of higher education and employers. As you know, this subcommittee was instrumental in creating the apprenticeship grants program in fiscal year 2016, has continued to fund this program with $185 million in fiscal year 2021. I am pleased that the President's American Rescue Plan and American Jobs Plan include so many critical investments for our nation's workers and working families. The American Rescue Plan extended emergency unemployment benefits to millions of families, a critical lifeline for American workers who are temporarily out of a job. The American Jobs Plan will invest in American workers by providing $100 billion over 10 years to strengthen our workforce, protect workers against wage theft and workplace discrimination. The American Jobs Plan also includes the Protecting the Right to Organize, the PRO Act, which ensures all workers have a free and a fair choice to join a union, strengthens bargaining rights for public service workers. And it includes a new subsidized jobs program to tackle long-term unemployment and underemployment. I'm glad that President Biden's discretionary funding request builds on the American Rescue Plan and the American Jobs Plan by proposing $14.2 billion for 2022 for the Department of Labor, and that's an increase of $1.7 billion. The request includes $285 million for apprentice grants, to expand access for women, for people of color, and historically underrepresented groups, as well as expand apprenticeships to new industries. I'm encouraged that this request increases funding for state grants under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and Wagner-Pizer, and for worker protection agencies to protect workers to combat wage theft and enhance worker health and safety. As you also explained further in your testimony, Mr. Secretary, this pandemic revealed many longstanding problems in the unemployment insurance system, which disproportionately affect workers of color. I am pleased that this budget request seeks to rectify these continuing inequities. The investments are vital. Shining a light on these challenges, the subcommittee has already held hearings on community colleges and workplace health and safety. 2 years ago, we also held a hearing on combating wage theft, which the Economic Policy Institute estimates amounts to as much as $50 billion stolen from workers' paychecks every year. The previous administration exacerbated this problem, but the Biden administration wisely has proposed to rescind and withdraw the Trump administration's joint employment and independent contractor rules, which were poorly drafted and runs around worker wage theft protections included in the Fair Labor Standards Act. I believe the Biden administration can quickly build on that progress by ensuring that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration quickly issues an emergency temporary standard to protect workers from COVID-19, which continues to infect thousands of Americans each day, establishing enforceable, comprehensive requirements from OSHA is the only way to guarantee that all workers receive protections from the coronavirus that will help to keep them safe. And witnesses at our recent hearing highlighted the importance of including requirements to limit airborne transmissions in the meat and poultry plants, and to have robust protections for agricultural workers. We stand ready. I stand ready to support you and the administration and the work to release a strong, enforceable standard as soon as possible. Mr. Secretary, there are a lot of promising proposals, and we have made a lot of progress in recent months, but there is still much more work to be done. As F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote in his classic Meditation on the American Dream, The Great Gatsby, we must beat on, boats against the current, resisting the inclination to be borne back ceaselessly into the past. So I look forward to working with you as we build the architecture of the future, allow more people the opportunities to achieve the American dream. And with that, let me turn to my friend from Oklahoma, the ranking member, Congressman Cole, for opening remarks he may have.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for those robust birthday congratulations. Thank you particularly for not mentioning, as my colleagues on my side of the aisle often do, that I share my birthday with the late Saddam Hussein. So we're very generous in your omissions. And I've got to say, before I get into any kind of prepared remarks, I always come to these meetings because, of course, it's my obligation as a ranking member, but I always want to see what background you choose. Today's is particularly colorful. It's one. Where are you at? Oh, you're muted.
In Washington. So next time when we can all gather, that we will be here.
Terrific. Just fantastic, as it always is, except when you're broadcasting from your conference hideaway in the Capitol.
There's nothing there at the moment.
Homestead is better. Mr. Secretary, let me first welcome you and a couple of personal remarks. We had a scheduled call, which I was unable to make because I was caught in cell phone hell in the rural part of my district when it was scheduled, and we never made the connection. So this is the first time we've had a chance to meet, but followed your confirmation hearings with a great deal of interest. I know you bring a great deal to your job in terms of your expertise and your background, and I certainly look forward to working with you. As a matter of fact, the chairwoman made reference to your Irish background. Your last Democratic predecessor, Secretary Perez, was a particular favorite of mine because we shared an affection for Nicaraguan cigars. So since you're Irish, if you like Guinness, Irish cream ale, or Irish whiskey, we'll have a working basis for a relationship. Now, my quarrel today with your budget, insofar as we know it, because we haven't seen the full budget yet, is less with the particulars than with the overall strategy behind the president's domestic spending proposals. As I'm sure you're aware, and your department is broadly in line with this, the president has proposed a 16% increase in domestic spending overall, and basically flat funding, really inflation adjusted cut for defense. I simply think that's a wrong sense of priorities, and I think most of my Republican colleagues share that view. We think we live in an extraordinarily dangerous world right now, particularly one where the Russians and the Chinese are, if anything, more assertive. And we would argue we need to readdress the balance in the overall budget. There are particular areas where you'll find very little difference between how we see the world and how you see the world. I'm particularly pleased to see the robust increase in the apprenticeship spending. That was an area that supported under President Obama. President Trump actually increased that when it was supported on a bipartisan basis. I'm glad to see you building on that as well. And there's a variety of other job training programs that I think are extraordinarily important. And frankly, nobody's going to quibble with worker protection programs. They're necessary, and we know that that's a very important part of your job. So I think we'll find a mixture of areas that we can work with you on, again, particularly in job training, where I think there's a strong bipartisan commitment in this subcommittee. We see it not only in this budget, but in the education budget on everything from Job Corps to, again, the apprenticeship program to career tech kinds of programs where we've managed to work together. And I know that's an important part of what you want to do is to increase the skill sets of American workers so more of them can be productively and employed and receive the wages that their hard work and expertise demand. So again, we look forward to working with you. I'm not going to say we agree with everything. Obviously, we'll disagree on something like the PRO Act, where I would argue overturning 28 states' separately enacted right to work laws is a terrifically misplaced priority and frankly anti-democratic with a small d in my state, because that was a law that was passed by the people of Oklahoma, not by the legislature of Oklahoma, in an open election. And that's the case with many of these laws. But again, I look forward to getting to know you better. I look forward to working with you in the important areas that are under your supervision. One last housekeeping matter, Madam Chair, if I can. I may not be here at the end of the hearing. As you know, I'm on the Rules Committee as well. And our good friend, Chairman McGovern, is holding a hearing on the challenge of hunger in America. I know where you would want me to be in a topic like that. So I'll be probably here for about 90 minutes of our hearing. At that point, I'll need to withdraw. But with that, again, Mr. Secretary, welcome. Madam Chairman, thank you for holding the hearing, and I look forward to today's deliberations.
The ranking member, and I just might add, probably not for the cigar smoking, but I will certainly be around if we can enjoy Irish whiskey or others. So we should be all inclusive in this area. So thank you. And with that, let me just yield to the Honorable Marty Walsh, Secretary of the United States Department of Labor. And what I want to do is to turn to my colleague, Congresswoman Catherine Clark of the great state of Massachusetts, to introduce the Secretary. Congressman Clark.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman DeLauro, and happy birthday, and thank you, Ranking Member Cole and members of the subcommittee. It has been a great pleasure to know Secretary Marty Walsh for years, as a friend, as a colleague in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and as a partner in the fight for working families. Born and raised in Dorchester by immigrant parents, Marty is a second-generation union member. At age 21, he joined the Laborers Union Local 223 and served as the union's president until 2013. As mayor of Boston, he oversaw the creation of over 140,000 jobs and helped secure a statewide 15-hour minimum wage, paid sick leave, and family leave. He also established universal pre-K for all children in Boston and free community college for low-income students. As Secretary of Labor, he will continue to advocate for workers, job seekers, union members, and families. His dedication to working families has made him a key partner to President Biden in our COVID recovery as we work to get vaccines in arms, money in pockets, and stability back into our local economies. Marty understands that it's America's workers who keep our nation running, and it's Washington's job to ensure every family has a fair shot at success. Without safe working conditions, livable wages, good union jobs, and paid family and medical leave, American families can't succeed. America can't succeed. By investing in workers, we can rebuild an even more equitable and thriving economy. Secretary Walsh, we look forward to a robust discussion about the needs of working families and how Congress can partner with you and the Department of Labor to ensure that workers have the support they need. Welcome to our subcommittee. We are so grateful to have you here today. Thank you, Chairwoman, and I yield back.
Thank you so much. I would just want to associate myself with Congresswoman Clark's remarks. We are delighted and excited to have you here, and I think your background really, I think, reflects something that Frances Perkins said so many years ago as the first head of the Department of Labor, and that she came to work in Washington for God, for FDR, and for the working men and women of this country. So we know where you are. Thank you. And with that, let me let you know that your full written testimony will be included in the record, and you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement. Thank you. Hello?
Hear me?
We can now. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, I started with thanking you, Madam Chair, for
Start again. It's all right.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Technology is crazy. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for what you do, Ranking Member Cole. Thank you, and happy birthday to you. To my friend, Congressman Clark, thank you for that introduction. And what I said was that we're a long way from the 3rd Division, which is where we sat in the House of Representatives back in Massachusetts. To the members of this committee, it's a pleasure to appear before you for the first time, as the chairwoman said earlier. I look forward to outlining the Biden-Harris administration's vision for the Department of Labor in fiscal year 2022 and beyond. I'm honored to lead the department in this work. As I've said before, that's personal for me. As you've heard, my parents both came from Ireland, immigrated from Ireland in the 1950s. I followed my father into the labor's union. That journey brought me here today and made everything that I have in my life possible at every step. I continue to work for worker advocacy, worker protections, and access to good jobs. What we're talking about today, just on budget numbers to me, I know that they're not to you either. People's lives and dreams are at stake, and right now our country's future needs these protections. As a pandemic has fallen, it's taken millions of lives and 500,000 Americans' lives throughout the pandemic. Through it all, working men and women have carried us and cared for us. They put their lives on the line every single day, and millions lost their livelihoods. So it's our ability to meet this historic moment. It depends on how we support and empower working people. Congress worked with President Biden to pass the American Rescue Plan, delivering relief for American workers and a way out of this pandemic. This legislation is enabling the Department of Labor to keep vulnerable workers safe and supported as we reopen our economy. But as the president has made clear, reopening isn't enough. We need to build back better. The president has proposed a bold path forward with the American Jobs Plan. It got infrastructure that we need to win the future, and the vision to understand that a strong economy depends on a strong workforce. The Department of Labor's fiscal 22 budget would advance this vision by investing in American workers. This budget requests $14.2 billion in discretionary funds and includes $3.7 billion for job training and employment services through state formula grants under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act and the Wagner-Pfizer Act. It asks for $285 million for registered apprenticeships. We request $2.1 billion for our worker protection agencies. For unemployment insurance, this budget fully funds and updates the state's funding formulas for the first time in decades. It requires $100 million to develop technology solutions in state systems. These investments focus on deep needs that have been clearly needed and often cruelly exposed by this pandemic, but they're not new. Too many Americans face too many barriers to a good, safe, fairly paid job. People of color are held back by structural racism. Women have been pushed out of the workforce. Dislocated workers changing industries. Our veterans, our service members, and military spouses facing difficult transitions. People with disabilities underemployed and underpaid. At-risk youth and justice-involved adults who need a real chance and a better path. The Department of Labor, with our partners, can meet these workers where they are, and we can train and support the way they need to be trained and supported, so they can contribute their talents and join the middle class. I know we all know this is the right thing to do, and our future and our economy depends on it. The pandemic has shown why worker protection is a fundamental right and an essential function of government. As the chairwoman mentioned earlier, today is Workers' Memorial Day. It's a day that we honor thousands of workers who died on the job each year. I have had friends that lost their lives in work and construction. It's truly devastating for their families, and these are largely preventable tragedies. Our country has made progress on workplace safety, but after losing hundreds of health and safety inspectors during the last administration, our progress was put at risk. These funds will allow us to hire and deploy staff to prevent injury, illness, and death on the job. recover back wages and address misclassification, respond to whistleblower complaints, help retirees get their benefits, and address pay inequities. The last year has also proven that unemployment insurance is a lifeline for millions of workers, an essential backstop for our economy. The pandemic shined a light also on longstanding problems in state UI systems that hurt families and local economies. This budget would finally address them in a comprehensive way. Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member and members of this committee, American workers get our nation through hard times like we've just been through. We need to have their backs, protect their rights, and get them the tools they need to build on our future. I look forward to working with you in partnership with all of you, Democrats and Republicans. And I know that we'll have disagreements along the way, but we will always have conversations. We will always talk about what our differences are. And I'm a person that firmly believes there's always middle ground. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I look forward to the hearing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Let me get right to it. We know the meatpacking industry has been pushing against an enforceable emergency temporary standard for COVID-19. They use these arguments that they are protecting workers from illness by installing flimsy plastic barriers, implementing, quote, distancing when feasible policies. This is the same industry that succeeded in receiving waivers from the USDA to increase production line speeds during the first few months of the pandemic. They made it almost impossible for workers to move further apart. I have to be honest with you, Secretary Walsh. I'm disappointed that the administration has yet to finalize that OSHA ETS to protect these workers. Can you assure me that the meat industry's bogus arguments, shameless lobbying are not behind the administration's delay in finalizing the ETS?
The short answer to your question, Madam Chair, is yes. They're not behind this. We're going through a process. We went through a process, and that's exactly where we're moving towards. And right now, the OIRA process can vary, but we can't give you a deadline on predict the deadline. But right now, all that information on the ETS is at the White House.
Okay, and it's
not necessarily the White House, but in the next step.
right. I understand, but we really do need, and if you can get back to us, very much into things can languish forever at OIRA, and we don't have forever. And just a quick question here is, the industry has also said that the supply chain would be disrupted. Now, California, Virginia have adopted their own standards. They don't seem to be having any problems selling steaks or hamburgers. Is the supply chain argument bogus or disconnected from reality?
Well, in some ways, the supply chain could be a real issue, but it really depends upon what masks we talk about. I think when we talk about masks, we talk about safety, we talk about N95s for hospital staff. That's a complete different situation to what we want to do with masks. So I think that we're going to be working to make sure that we never leave any employee behind and put them at risk. I just spent the last 7 years as mayor. I spent the last year as mayor of Boston during the pandemic. And in the very beginning of the pandemic, there was some big issues around supply chain. That has changed. I have a mask right here. And the CDC has said in some cases you double up, you do masks. So again, this is all going to be worked out through the OIRA process.
Okay, and please, we need a deadline on that and when it's coming forward. Let me move now to community colleges. As I mentioned, we had a hearing just a couple of weeks ago. From 2011, 2014, we put in $2 billion community college through the Trade Adjustment Assistance and Community College and Career Training Grant TACT. And the investment supported partnerships, community colleges and economic sectors to develop education, the training programs to ensure a skilled workforce for good jobs. We created a new program 2 years ago, the Strengthening Community Colleges Training Grant Program, to return to what we viewed as a successful model. How will the Department of Labor leverage this program, bring it to scale to address the economic effects of the pandemic to support community colleges, dislocated workers, and their families?
Well, I think that question is key to the success and the rebound of America right now. I think we have to work closely with community colleges. I've already had one meeting with the National Community College Association. As the mayor of Boston, I have very close relations with my community colleges in Boston. We provided free community college for all graduates if they chose to go to community college in the city of Boston. We leveraged the development in the city to pay for it. And I think that that's a way back. And one of the things that I spoke about, I was asked often about my confirmation hearing from both Democrats and Republicans, was about doing more collaboration with community colleges, because community colleges oftentimes are the industry in small communities all across America. So what we're going to do is the Department of Labor is working on these programs that has been approved by Congress, and we're going to continue to strengthen those programs. And I think there's a tie-in as well with workforce development and community colleges, even a closer relationship that we can train and help retrain more workers in our workforce, and kids, young people that go to college, and older people, quite honestly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I've got about, just a few seconds left. So what I will do is I'm going to yield back my time. I want to get into the issue of IRAPs and just calling for an end to IRAPs, what the Biden administration has done, but that authority still exists. So I want you to be thinking about that, and we'll get around to that question. With that, I yield back, and let me recognize Congressman Cole.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And again, Mr. Secretary, good to have you here today. According to reports from the Government Accountability Office, the department's experienced some challenges with assessing the impact of job training for dislocated workers offered under programs such as the Trade Adjustment Assistance for Workers Program and Dislocated Worker Formula Program. The department actually agreed with the GOA's recommendation that the agency prioritize improving the quality of evidence on the impact of job training for dislocated workers. It's early in your days there, I know, but have you had an opportunity to look into this and what steps the DOL has made in response to that recommendation?
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. And again, happy birthday to you today.
Thank you.
You're right. I am early in my tenure here. I think this is my 5th week, but certainly I have been having briefings with the different departments on this. I will give you a more thorough answer after the hearing, because I still have to do some work on it. But the department's duty, as you know, is to support workers in our communities, even during the aftermath of disasters or COVID and other things like that. The grants that we're working on will impact workers and will help us with temporary employment. So what I would like to say to you today is I'll try and get an answer before the hearing's over, but I look forward to working with you and getting a more thorough answer for you.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And I know, again, that's a bipartisan concern. We all want to get people back to work that have been put out. Let me ask you, this is also, you may need to sort of get back to me later, but I'm going to be very shamelessly parochial here. Tinker Air Force Base is in my district. And when I talk to, it doesn't matter who the commanding general is. It's actually the largest single site employer in the state. These are very sophisticated air depot, 16,000 civilian jobs and overhauling planes. And they always tell me two things. I could hire every computer software engineer that could be produced in the state of Oklahoma by either of your comprehensive, and I really need cybersecurity experts. And you actually have considerable funds at your disposal through the H-1B application fee, literally for the purpose of retraining workers in high skill areas. Certainly wouldn't expect an answer today, but I'd love it if you could look at that, because I think, again, particularly in the cybersecurity space, all across the country, the need is real. It's going to continue to grow. And again, these are jobs that a lot of people, I think, can be trained for and could be really helpful. So you actually have a pot of money where that might be something you and your folks would be interested in looking at. So I just put that in front of you as a suggestion.
No, thank you. Certainly it's a very interesting and could be very great proposal. So I look forward to working on that. And I actually think that in the economy that we're in today, after COVID, we have to think differently about job training. When I think about some cities around America, lots of tech companies moving in, lots of companies moving in. As we think about retraining workers, we should train them in these different industries, whether it's cybersecurity, other places like that. And so I look forward to not just working with you, but other members of the committee. And I've asked my team here to look at some of the job training stuff, to think outside the box a little bit. Not so much this, I don't mean to say like there's the same old, but let's think outside the box. Because there's lots of pockets of industry like you have in your district and other people have in their district, that having a job training program or access to funding to help build up skills for cities and towns, that'd be, I think, a lot of cities and towns would welcome that, and as well as mayors and governors would welcome that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think there'll be a lot of bipartisan support for initiatives like that. Last question here, because of short time. Your budget outline mentions an update for the formula for determining the amount states receive to administer unemployment insurance, as well as significant investments in unemployment insurance administration, information technologies. Can you give us a little bit more detail? And again, it's early. You may not have developed all the specifics yet at the targets of these investments. In other words, what will the updated formula look like? How will the investments in information technology address fraud and unemployment systems? I know in my own state, we were almost overwhelmed by the pandemic in terms of the unemployment needs. And, again, they did the best they could, but they simply didn't have the technology, the personnel they needed for an extraordinary situation, like all of us confronted in our states.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that, 30 million Americans were unemployed last March. That overwhelmed the system as a whole in Massachusetts as well. And I think that, between the money that's invested in the American Rescue Plan and some of the money that we're looking for in this budget, I think we're going to take a deep look into all UI. I know later on in the conversation, I'm sure fraud will come up, but it was a safety net for a lot of people. It kept food on the table, kept roof over their head. And there's lots of different aspects. And we're going to look at the different aspects, how we can work with the states. I know my time is up. If you give me 10 more seconds. Working with the states in strengthening their systems, but also working here at the DOL to figure out how do we make sure something like what the problems we had experienced don't happen again. So again, that's another issue that I know it's an issue for almost every single member of Congress. It's an issue probably for 50 governors, and it's an issue for 180 million Americans for the future.
Well, fraud can always be a problem, but I certainly agree with your basic point that this was a program that was needed. It helped a lot of people that really needed the help at the time. So just trying to figure out how to administer it better going forward. But I don't have any complaints with what we did and how the department performed under difficult circumstances. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. And let me yield now to Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for this hearing. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being with us today. Congratulations. A couple of things I want to ask you. One is you mentioned the issue of structural racism, and I think this administration gets it. I mean, when you look at I think the unemployment rates now, 5.4% for white workers, 9.6% unemployment rate for Black African Americans, and about 7.9%. I think these numbers for Latinos are fairly accurate. But bottom line is, there have been many secretaries who I have asked to submit a report to this committee and they've never submitted it. So I just want to ask you, and you mentioned structural racism, how do you see the barriers to employment within the Department of Labor, and how do you dismantle those barriers as you move forward on your equity agenda to make sure that there are policies and a budget and budget priorities to make sure that these unemployment rates are closed and that people of color are employed without and we know the structural racism. So you have to dismantle the barriers first. Then secondly, let me just ask you, is Executive Order 11246 still on the books? That was President Johnson's executive order that prohibits federal contractors from discriminating against people of color, I believe the language is sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, and it was designed to expand opportunities for people who have been shut out of the employment sectors, all of the sectors in our country. And so is that still on the books? And if so, are you looking at Executive Order 11246 to begin to use that to prohibit discrimination?
Yeah, let me, yes, and it's, I was just been told it's OFCCP's jurisdiction. And it's
Yes,
on the books.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's still in the books.
It is. Okay. Have you looked at how you're going to use it? I don't think it's been used much in the past.
No, I haven't, and I will.
Okay.
Thank you
And
for that.
then what about?
Let me. Sorry. Thank you for the question. Let me start with the first part of your question. How do you deal with structural racism? I think it's leadership. I think it's empowering people that, when I say empowering people that I work with, I think it's coming up with a comprehensive plan. And I do agree with, you have to have benchmarks and you have to have reports, because if we don't give a report to someone, then it will linger on and not move forward. I think when we think about equity, We think about equity in procurement. That's a big issue that I work with in the city of Boston that we didn't do a great job with. We put down a good system, but I learned a lot of lessons from that opportunity. We learned about creating opportunities and pathways for people to be able to get into the middle class. And I think you start in departments. I think I start here at the Department of Labor. When I talk about structural racism and I talk about opportunities, I think if we don't create them within the Department of Labor, how can I go out and talk to employers around America and tell a story to them? This is what I expect you to do, but I'm not doing it myself. And I think that that's something that's really important that we've done. I've learned that over the last bunch of years as an elected official. And I think that we have a unique opportunity right now. I know in the Department of Labor, almost every single conversation that we have, whether we're talking about a policy or we're talking about how we're moving forward, we're talking about equity, inclusion, we're talking about structural racism, we're talking about all the issues. It's become part of the conversation. It's not just brought up when I'm in front of a camera and I'm doing a hearing in front of Congress. When the camera shuts off and I talk to my team, we're talking about it all the time. So I think we have a real opportunity. And because of COVID, and we all know this, it's no secret, COVID put a bigger spotlight on structural racism in our country. And we have to start addressing it, not by giving speeches, and I'm talking about me. We have to start addressing it by actually policy and making some real strong changes in the workforce. So that's what I plan on doing. And if you ask me for a report, I don't know what my predecessors did, I'll give you a report. You ask me to come to your office, I'll come to your office. You want to shoot me a phone call, I'll do whatever it is, and I'll tell you our progress. And if our progress isn't good, I will tell you our progress isn't good. And if our progress is good, that's for you to decide to tell me you're doing okay.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm really happy to hear that because you have such an important role in our economy and in ensuring that people are employed with good paying jobs. Also with apprenticeship programs, for example, there's so many barriers to people of color to enter into apprenticeship programs. So I assume that this is also part of what you're talking about, how we eliminate those barriers and make sure that there's no discrimination and that there are opportunities for people of color in apprenticeship programs.
Yeah, no, I have a strong history of that, of breaking down those barriers, and I'm not going to get into it right now with you unless you want me to. But I created opportunities in Boston to do things, and the opportunities I brought where we can scale up. And one of those opportunities was a program I want to just briefly talk about this called Operation Exit. I created as mayor of the city of Boston. It was a 3-week pre-apprentice program. The people that went into that program, most of them had been incarcerated. Some of them had bracelets on there. Some of them had court cases open. Some of them were gang involved people. And the success of that program has been unbelievable. And I'd like to take that program and scale it up in Boston. I think we have about 104 people that have gone through that program. It proves it works. And we can take that program around the country with the help of the Department of Labor, but also with the help of industry.
Thank you again. Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Yes, Congressman Harris.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congratulations again. Thanks for the courtesy call last week. Let me follow up on a topic we talked about on that call, the H-2B visas. As you know, Ms. Pingree and I included amendments that allowed the Secretary of Homeland Security, after consultation with the Secretary of Labor, to issue additional visas. Now, the Department of Labor has already certified the need for 127,000, and yet only 22,000 additional ones were issued. So can you just let me know, were you consulted by Secretary Mayorkas? And if you were, what was your recommendation for the number of additional visas to issue under the amendment?
Yeah, let me get the information on the amendment, but I have been talking to Secretary Mayorkas. We've had several conversations about this. We're working through the process. I had a meeting yesterday with some people on my team talking about the regulation around the additional visas that will be allocated. I don't have the exact number in front of me right now, but I can get the number for you. Actually, I do have the number, 22,000 additional visas that'll be there. And yesterday we had a meeting. You had talked to me about, I believe, the crab processing plant that you have in your district. I've also gotten calls from several senators and Congressman Keating and other folks. So we had a meeting yesterday and trying to move that along. Those regulations should be done shortly. And it goes on to the next step. So I don't see much further delay in this other than just getting the regulation together.
Yeah. And again, the Department of Labor has certified the need for about 130,000. We're only going to get 88,000. So I'm hopeful the Department of Labor can have more input into that process of determining the number of additional visas, because your department has already, gone through the legwork of figuring out what's necessary. Let me just bring up one other topic, the ERISA standalone telehealth benefit. You know that during COVID, ERISA employers were allowed to provide standalone benefits to people for telehealth for temporary workers and other people who didn't qualify for full benefits. Is that something that the department is considering extending based on experience with the telehealth standalone benefit?
Congressman, if you don't mind, I haven't heard about this before, but respectfully, I ask if I could get either call you with the answer or in writing to you. It's the first time I've heard this.
Okay, no, that'd be great, and I appreciate it. You're drinking from a fire hose right now, no question about it. With regard to the minimum wage, I know the president wants to advance the minimum wage, but there's great concern from especially small businesses, restaurants in my district about including the tipped minimum wage, about raising the tipped minimum wage, because the statistics are that most people who are getting paid under the tipped minimum wage actually earn more than the minimum wage when tips are included. And our businesses that were small businesses, especially restaurants that were so damaged under COVID, have told me that if they have to pay a minimum wage to their tipped employees, they'll just close up, they'll go out of business. They can't afford to do it. The market will not bear that. So considering that tipped minimum wage employees earn more than the minimum wage when you include tips, is this something that you would consider, separating out from the minimum wage discussions that are going to, go forward in the next few months?
Again, that's an issue that we've had many conversations about, and I don't think there's been any final decisions on where we're going with this. I've heard from both sides of, I wouldn't say the aisle. When I say aisle, I'm not talking Democrats or Republicans. I'm from restaurant people. I've gotten some calls from Boston saying, don't change the rule. The rule is great. And I've gotten restaurants in Boston saying that workers saying the rule isn't great. So we are doing, I am doing a deep dive on this to look to see what's the best way to move forward. And so I have not personally made a final decision. Not that it's necessarily all my decision, obviously, but we're going to continue to have conversations around this.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you, because again, in other areas of the country, my rural areas, $15 minimum wage for tipped employees would be, I think, very harmful to our small businesses. Finally, one last issue, and I read with interest your testimony, supporting good union jobs, and I believe every American has the right to be in a union. These are good paying jobs. Do you have concern that the Keystone XL pipeline cancellation basically canceled 10,000 union jobs? 4 big unions were supporters of it. I think it's an energy independence issue. It's a high-paying American job issue. Did that give you a little heartburn?
One of those 4 unions that had a problem with it is LIUNA, Labor's International Union North America, of which I'm a member of. But inside the American Jobs Plan, there is money in there for workforce development, job training. And I do feel we have an opportunity at this moment in time to train and retrain some of our workers in those different industries for the green economy and the tech economy. There's lots of opportunities there. So I think, again, we'll be having probably many conversations about that. But at some point, I do think that we have to look at the job training, because these jobs that the president spoke about the other day, the green jobs, they're good. They can be good paying jobs and put lots of Americans to work.
All right. Thank you. I yield back.
Congressman Pocan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Secretary. Sorry I missed our call last week, but I do want to let you know I'm a 30-year member of IUPAT, Painters and Allied Trades, and co-founder of the Labor Caucus, so we look forward to working with you on moving things forward. First, I just want to say I completely agree with the chair of the committee, who has brought up the issue around OSHA and meatpacking, and whatever we can do to get that resolved. I still am stunned that JBS was only fined $15,000 for its lack of COVID safety protocols after 6 workers died at a Colorado plant. The average funeral was more than they were fined, and they're a $50 billion profitable company. So clearly that's important to a lot of us. Let me ask you a question about Amazon. Last year, a lot of people were overcome by the pandemic, and people were struggling to put food on their tables. Amazon reported its best year ever, shattering records and reporting an astronomical annual profit of $21.3 billion. And yet, despite their exploding profits, Amazon has repeatedly flouted worker safety rules and shown little care for its workers and their well-being. Most recently, their terrible treatment of their employees was highlighted when drivers and warehouse workers leaked, no pun intended, that because of their schedules they're put on, they can't even take bathroom breaks and are forced to urinate in bottles and defecate in bags. Amazon tried to deny it originally on Twitter until so many people put actual photos of employees of what they've had to do. They had to apologize because those claims are true. What steps can the Department of Labor take to ensure that companies like Amazon are held accountable for their mistreatment of workers? And I'm hoping that we're going to commit to direct the Department of Labor to investigate claims from workers like those at Amazon about their working conditions.
Thank you, Congressman, for that. And I didn't realize you were a member of the Painters, so it's great to have a fellow building trade person on the Zoom call. When I think about whether it's the workers at Amazon or any other workers in America, it really is about strengthening up our enforcement. And when I became the Secretary of Labor, we looked at OSHA. We found that we're down almost 200 inspectors. We look at wage and hour, we're down inspectors. It really is about building up enforcement. And I don't mean just to enforce when something bad happens, but it'd be great to get to a point where we're working collaboratively with employers on the way how to treat employees fairly. So the enforcement aspect of it is the best way we can do it. And as we move forward here in the next coming months, we're going to be hiring people and training them, getting them ready so we can get them out on the job sites across America. Right now, quite honestly, we don't have enough inspectors to be able to inspect every single complaint that comes into OSHA or anything in the Department of Labor, quite honestly. So we really have to build up our strength here.
Great. No, thank you. Also, since the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935, 86 years ago, there really haven't been any major pro-worker labor laws that have been passed. And as a result, I think we've seen corporations chip away at the middle class over the last several decades. Now more than ever, it's important we update our labor laws and empower the Department of Labor to protect our workers. Given the emergence of the mega corporations like Amazon, 50% of all e-commerce sales, 5% of all retail sales in the country, given the rise of the gig economy, what can we do besides the PRO Act that we passed out of the House to continue to make sure that workers, no matter in what format they're working, have rights that unfortunately we've seen erode, especially in the last 4 years?
I think that we have to stop looking at worker protections as anti-business. And it isn't. It's pro-employee. And many of the people, all the employees that we're talking about, we represent them one way or the other. So I think that that's number one. I think that would be important for us to move forward here. And two is an educational component of it. I think we have to educate people as well as how to make sure that we treat our employees right. When it comes to misclassification and independent contracting, those folks should be treated as employees. They should get the same protections and the same benefits an employee does because they're providing the same services as other employees in other industries. So I think that we're going to have many conversations about this. And I think we get stuck up on one or two certain company names and saying, oh my God, this industry, we can't change it. It's not about the industry. It's about the employee. It's about making sure we treat the American worker correctly. And again, I think that the biggest thing I would say is that worker rights are not anti-business. So we want to see business succeed. And I want to see business succeed because business employs employees, and we need to continue to work together and not draw a line in the sand.
Great. 2 seconds back. I'll yield back, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank the gentleman, and let me now recognize Congressman Fleischman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, I've been actually participating in two hearings concurrently. I'm the ranking member on Homeland Security, but I wanted to let you know that I wanted to take the time to speak with you today, first and foremost, to congratulate you on your appointment and to thank you for the very kind phone call you made to me last week. I think we had a very good, deep conversation about a lot of things and, of course, about some very important things like baseball as well. So I wish you every success in your endeavors, sir. The Energy Employees Occupational Illness Compensation Program was intended to correct decade-old injustices perpetrated on the Department of Energy employees, such as uranium miners, millers, and ore transporters, to ensure that they receive fair compensation for illnesses incurred on the job. The reality is that the program is a far cry from what the workers and their advocates envision. Some decisions made by the DEE-OIC for this program have been contrary to the letter and spirit of the original law. The program was intended to be a claimant-friendly process. Unfortunately, bureaucratic red tape has restricted these benefits from our sick nuclear workers and their survivors. And as you may know, I represent the Oak Ridge Reservation, but there are several DOE reservations affected by this agency. My question, sir, my first question, stakeholders feel that the final rule proposed in 2015 and published in 2019 are more restrictive than the previous regulations and the statute itself. What are your thoughts on rescinding the rules and entering into a negotiated rulemaking process with stakeholder representatives, sir?
Thank you very much, Congressman, for your question. Thank you also for the conversation the other day. I don't have a lot of information about that rule in front of me, but certainly the way you just explained it to me, the intention is to help the worker, and I absolutely will make that a priority of mine. Actually, I have people in the room right now, they'll probably run and find out what's going on, make a priority of mine right now to see how do we strengthen that. They shouldn't have been anything that was worker protection or helping workers. The intention behind it should have been to help workers. And if that's not what happened, then that's something that we have to fix. And I will work with you on that. And I will try and find an answer before the hearing's over. I apologize. First, I've heard of it.
Yes, sir. And as a follow-up to that, and that is fair, it's a very niche thing on DOE areas. Of course, these are men and women, overwhelmingly good, strong union workers who for years worked around some very dangerous substances like beryllium and things like that. And they've been adversely affected, and many are sick, and we just try to get them that compensation. A follow-up question that we can get information on. During the advisory board on toxic substance and worker health meeting last week, this DEE-OIC notified the board that they will be provided with a support contractor. I think that is a good step in the right direction. My question for you will be then, and I will await an answer when you can look into it. How long do you anticipate the procurement process to take before the board receives the much needed assistance?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll get back to you on that too, and I'll look into that. You know, I've had some good briefings about black lung and some other illnesses that get workers sick, and this is one area that was not touched upon. Maybe it's because it's a unique area, but it's certainly something. And I'll also look into other areas of safety for workers that aren't part of what you asked me today, just to make sure that the department is doing everything they can. A worker's a worker, and illnesses are illnesses, and just because something gets more play in the press, it doesn't mean we shouldn't look at the other issues. So let me look at that, and I'll get back. I promise I'll get back to you on that.
Yes, sir. And in concluding, I'm just going to say I have worked very hard on computer science literacy. I see my friend and colleague, Ms. Lee, as well. She has worked on that as well with a lot of companies. I look forward to working with you so that we can expand computer science literacy, not only to inner city America, but also to rural America for education and for workforce development. And with that, Madam Chair, I will yield back, and I thank you.
Let me just quickly say that response to that. I've already had a meeting with Secretary Raimondo from Commerce and Secretary Cardona from Education to talk about how do we partner the three of us together to expand some opportunities, and computer science could be one of those areas that we could all fall into because of the commerce, the labor, and the education.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. I've just been informed that there's a series of tech issues that we were having here, and that is with the live stream. So I just want to let folks know, and Mr. Secretary and members, that I'm told we need to pause 10 minutes. I hope it's a shorter period of time. I apologize, Congresswoman Clark, because you're next, but this is I'm taking the advice from the techies here in terms of what we need to do to get the the hearing live stream. So I hope it's a shorter period of time than that, but we'll be right back to you. So thank you. Thank you for your indulgence. Ms. Frankel, Congresswoman Frankel.
I'm here.
Wait,
Wait, I'm getting my act together. Okay,
okay.
here we go. Hello. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Secretary. And nice to see you. Oh, I see that little girl. She's so cute. Okay. Mr. Secretary, thank you. I enjoyed our conversation last week, and I know you're ready for my questions. And congratulations, you sound like the right person for this job. So I'm not going to go through all the statistics that our chair ably did about women being out of work. We know they've hit the hardest by this pandemic, especially disproportionately women of color. Millions lost their job, millions jobs have disappeared. And, I think our president is the right person for, to get us moving forward. I love his plans, his job plan. I love what I expect will be part of the family plan. What is concerning to me is that he talks about them as two separate plans. Because I think it's very important that we get people get back to work, and that means women getting back to work. So we shouldn't have one job plan that gets mostly men back to work and then have a separate job plan that maybe is going to get women back to work. And so I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about what's happened in the childcare industry. I know I'm hoping Catherine Clark is going to do that too, but there's obviously a crisis. We just have lost a lot of centers and slots because people were not using childcare. And so we know this. Parents can't go back to work if we don't have childcare. And we also know that the childcare is a great industry especially for moms to work in if we can get their salaries up, which is what we absolutely should do. And shortchanging women it's not just about the women, it shortchanges the families they support, the men in their families having to work 2 or 3 jobs. So let me just start with your comment, because in terms of how we're going to make sure that as we move the president's packages along, women are all going to get jobs, because one more thing is this. What I'm concerned is by having two funding the jobs program one way, the family plan another way, that women are going to be left out. So my first question to you is, how are you going to make sure that women are going to get back into this job market, that they're going to be paid fairly, and that we're going to restore our childcare industry and make sure that we're training enough moms or people who want to be childcare workers?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, and thank you for your conversation the other day and your interest in pushing us. First, I just want to say the Women's Bureau is the only federal office exclusively focused with serving and promoting the interests of women in the workforce. So within the Department of Labor, we have the only office that exclusively is focused on women in the workforce. If I have time, I'll go through some of the areas that the Women's Bureau is focused on. Number two, I don't think we should look at the 2 plans the president put forth, or actually 3 plans: the rescue plan, the jobs plan, or the families plan as 3 individual plans. They all collectively work together. And in the jobs plan, there's money in there for workforce development. There's money in for the cares economy. When I say the cares economy, I'm not just talking about strengthening the employees that work in the jobs plan, but also creating opportunities. You're absolutely 100% right when you said that many of our childcare facilities might not come back after the pandemic. They lost their revenue, they lost their support, they lost their kids, and the women that left the workforce, some of those families are never going to go back into childcare. We need to get them back in. It's important for our economy.
Secretary Walsh, I'm sorry, I'm so rude to interrupt you, I know, but I only have a few seconds. Here's what I would really appreciate. I think this is important, is that you analyze with the so-called jobs plan, how many women you believe are going to get back into the workforce with that plan versus the family plan. And let's stop calling, truthfully, one a jobs plan and one a family plan, because what I see in the family plan, what I expect is a jobs plan. And I just really would like you to start thinking about that, because otherwise I think women are going to just be left out.
Okay, no, I will, and we'll get numbers on that for you.
Thank you, sir. Yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Congresswoman Herrera Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for reaching out to all of us. I really appreciate that. I know you have more than a few things on your plate, so it is very honorable for you to reach out and start the conversation. Even though I know, even on the other side of the aisle, we're going to have a lot of disagreements. I just really appreciate that. I think it's nice to see those types of things being restored. I wanted to ask. Now, this is a little bit of a harder issue. Obviously the pandemic exposed the fact that our unemployment system is inefficient and seriously underprepared to respond to crises. And I know that state agencies were given a very large task in this last year to administer benefits to millions of people. And I got to tell you, whether every day in my office I would hear from single parents or a pregnant woman or a senior who waited for hours on the phone to have their call dropped, or their identities were stolen. No joke, there's a class action suit starting in Washington State. I mean, it was just horrific. Over $1 billion was basically given away to fraud. And I think those weaknesses in our system really impacted the most vulnerable folks. Recently, the Department of Labor, OIG, issued a memorandum that stated that the Employment and Training Administration needs to take immediate action to ensure state agencies implement effective controls to mitigate fraud and improper payments. OIG estimated that the improper payments could be around $89 billion, with a significant portion of that being due to fraud. Again, it was $1.1 billion in my own state of Washington. And despite that fraud, the individual who is now in charge of the Department of Labor program that oversees unemployment insurance benefits is Susie Levine, who was the head of Washington's unemployment, or ESD, when it gave away those billions of dollars. And it was a very frustrating experience across the board. It was a very bipartisan frustration with what we felt like someone who was put in place to do a job she just was not equipped to do. I know a number of us sent a letter alerting you to those concerns as she was being now put on the federal, in that same role on the federal level. But I raise all this because I don't want to see what happened in Washington State happen on the national level. And I wanted to see, in your budget proposal, it doesn't mention integrity measures or fraud prevention, or at least if it does, I didn't see it. And unemployment is a high error program, but I need to know from you that you're going to not allow this to happen nationwide, and kind of what measures you're going to be putting in place. Maybe I just missed it in the budget to attack this problem.
No, thank you very much for your question and your concern. As I said earlier, just to kind of recap real quickly, last March, 30 million Americans kind of were unemployed at one time. In my own state of Massachusetts, we didn't have enough people to be able to take the request that came in. The city of Boston partnered with the state, with my governor, to help with call takers and to better kind of put these processes in place. I wasn't the Secretary of Labor last year. I wish I was, because as these problems were coming in as Secretary of Labor, I would have intervened with states all across America, and I would have said, how do we help with the distribution of the benefits, and how do we make sure we're catching the fraud? So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. We could point at different people for whatever happened, but moving forward. Later on today, I have a meeting with my folks at UI to talk about fraud and to talk about some of the things that happen and how we move forward. But as we think about investing the $2 billion into fixing the system, I believe there's something like $600-700 million that's going to go into technical support for states. And there's going to be other money that's going to go into other ways of happening. So fraud needs to be at the forefront of this to eliminate fraud in the system. Integrity needs to be put back in the system. The people that collected unemployment insurance feel confident when they got the check finally, but many of them waited months or weeks and months to get the check. So we have to put integrity back in the system. You have my commitment, 100% of my commitment, that this will be one of the top areas that I work on as the Secretary of Labor to make sure that something like this doesn't happen. God forbid we have a pandemic in the future, that something like this happens, but we have to have a system that works for everyone. In 2008, when we had a recession in this country, there was issues with unemployment, I believe back then, there was issues in 2020, and we have to make sure future looking that we don't have issues in the system. So I look forward to working with you, and I also look forward to working with this Congress in order to pass, if we have to pass legislation, we pass legislation, but to take the issues in UI out of them.
I appreciate that. And you're right. We had those problems in 2008 and Congress thought it took steps to fix it. And so when it happened again in 2020, it was frustrating. So I appreciate your emphasis on this because I don't want to be here again. And thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you.
So, let me inquire, is Congresswoman Clark back?
I am.
Okay, you're on, Congresswoman Clark.
Thank you, Chairwoman DeLauro, and thank you again, Secretary Walsh, for joining us. I want to follow up on some of the questions from Congresswoman Frankel. As we know, and I know you understand, that women have borne the brunt of this pandemic's weight, from taking on more child and family care responsibilities to disproportionately serving in some of the most dangerous roles as healthcare workers and other frontline workers. This year has been extremely difficult for women in the workforce. A sociologist, Jessica Calarco, summed it up well when she said, "Other countries have social safety nets. The United States has women." As a result, a disproportionate loss of jobs for women, and in particular women of color, have arisen throughout this pandemic. In December, the economy lost a net 140,000 jobs, and every single one of those jobs belonged to a woman. I would like to know, to follow up, I know from your work on universal pre-K in the city of Boston that you understand that there isn't a hierarchy of infrastructure, that childcare is as valuable to getting our workforce going, to growing jobs, and to making sure that we get women back into the workforce and get us out of this 33-year low we have in workforce participation. Can you expand a little on your approach and that of President Biden as equating the families plan that we are going to hear more details about tonight and the jobs plan, and how they really are one infrastructure investment?
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, for your question. I hear background. I don't know if that's me. I think first and foremost, I think in the American Jobs Plan, when the president is recommending allocating $400 billion to the CARES economy, the issue around women in the workforce is also a bigger issue because you have women who are paid less than men. You have women of color paid less than white women. You have Latino and African American paid less. So in the jobs plan, a lot of that is addressed. It's about raising wages for women that work in that particular industry, but it's also about creating opportunity. The Women's Bureau, if you could bear with me for 2 minutes, well, 1 minute here, because we only have 2 minutes. The Women's Bureau has designed 4 goals to respond to the current conditions that women face navigating the pandemic recovery and economic recovery. Disrupt occupational segregation and get more women pathways to good jobs. Jobs plan and the American Families Plan will address that. Reducing penalties for women in low paid work by expanding access to paid leave, medical leave, paid sick days, child care, elder care, closing the gender gaps in programs like unemployment insurance, and eliminating the gender-based discrimination in the workplace through policies and practices that promote equal pay and confront sexual harassment in the workplace, pregnancy discrimination, disability and sexual orientation, and gender identity-related discrimination. All of this has to be done together. We can't just do one aspect and not the other, as you know that. Even our time in the legislature, we passed lots of pay equity bills, but we didn't change the narrative. And it really, we have to be laser focused on how do we change the narrative. So that's some of the stuff. I don't want to take your time. I'll go back to you and I can answer more questions later as well.
Specifically earlier, you raised the issue around apprenticeships and high quality registered apprenticeships. And we know that women and people of color have often faced barriers into accessing those programs. Do you plan to engage with these communities as we look to the future of our workforce, in particular with these apprenticeship programs?
Yeah, I think we have to engage with the stakeholder community, and we also have to engage in the apprenticeship programs to make sure that people understand how do they access these jobs, how do they access these programs, and what are the barriers there. And some, quite honestly, some of the barriers are childcare. So we need to make sure that as we set up these apprentice programs, there's an opportunity for childcare.
Yeah.
Construction industry is the best example. We don't have childcare. Boston's doing a pilot right now. The building trades is doing a pilot to create childcare opportunities in the city. If that works, we can take that, scale it across the country, and make it work for women so that the barrier isn't childcare.
In my last 20 seconds, going back to the opportunity to create good paying green jobs, what do you say to workers in the fossil fuel industry who are concerned about the vast potential for work in Biden's jobs plan?
There is great, good paying jobs coming down the road from the clean energy sector. These are good jobs. Some of these jobs are construction jobs. Some of these jobs are tech jobs. Some of these jobs are retrofitting jobs, and we need American workers to do those jobs.
Thank you, Secretary Walsh, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Cole. Secretary Walsh, thank you for being here. While unfortunately we don't have President Biden's complete budget to allow us to fully discuss the funding needs and oversight that this committee will be working on, I appreciate the information on funding levels you provided in your testimony and look forward to reviewing the completed budget when it's released. Many from my local chambers of commerce have voiced significant concerns with legislation such as the PRO Act, which I've consistently voted against during my time on the House Education and Labor Committee and on the floor. My home state of Virginia being right to work is one of the reasons it's been named as the best state to do business by CNBC. But now both federal and state laws are threatening this. Every American should have the right to get and hold a job, free from the requirement that they join a labor union. The PRO Act would preempt and prohibit that right. Workers, quite frankly, deserve more. What will you do to protect their right to privacy of their personal information and to protect their ability to work as an independent contractor, free from the requirement, or as an employee free from the requirement to join a labor union?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. And I know that your state is one of the ones ranked the highest, if not the highest, to do business. And, I think I said to you on the phone the other day when I talked to you, as mayor of the city of Boston, I want to put a good business tone out in the city. For 7 years as mayor, we had a AAA bond rating. For 7 years as mayor, we approved billions of dollars in new development in the city of Boston. We recruited companies to our city. As mayor of the city of Boston, we are on a pace to have pension liability fully funded by 2024. So I felt that as a mayor, I created good business culture in the city of Boston. Also as mayor, I supported the rights of organizing in the city of Boston. And I feel that workers deserve the right to choose without interference, or if they want to improve their workplace and to be able to join a union if they choose. I mean, that's the workers' right, just like it's their right to vote when I was the mayor, in or out. So I look forward to, I will work with you on this. And I don't think it's an either or. I think there's an opportunity for both. And I think that we'll have many conversations about this. But I do feel that people have the right, if they choose to join the union, they should have that right.
Absolutely. I am a supporter of unions. I believe they've provided worker protections in many dangerous employment areas and do want workers to have that right to choose. I've also heard from many small businesses in my district that in addition to operational complications COVID has caused, they're dealing with significant staffing shortages, despite offering higher than current minimum wage employment opportunities. Inflated unemployment benefits create an unworkable environment for the businesses to attract employees, and there are not proper enforcement mechanisms for these benefits. Local chambers of commerce in my district are saying that even when businesses are able to find prospective employees, they frequently don't show up for interviews as requested. The focus needs to be on getting people off unemployment and back into fulfilling jobs in their communities, not continuing to expand unemployment benefits. What will you do to shift that focus? And I'll have a follow-up if I could.
No, thank you. I think that I think that the president's plan to vaccinate people is a big step moving forward. Over 200 million vaccination shots have happened in our country. We're not at a place where we're at herd immunity yet, or the majority of people yet, but I think that that's a big step forward. I think we have to get this virus under control. I want to commend the Congress for two things. One is when I was the mayor, for passing the CARES Act, that actually gave $600 additional benefit to people that were unemployed when the pandemic began. Many people were in fear of losing their homes, losing their apartments, losing their ability to put food on the table. Also, in the American Rescue Plan, the ability to get additional $300, not the $600 that was given in the CARES plan, but $300 because people are still struggling out there. I honestly feel in my heart that the American worker would rather be at work than unemployed. I don't think anyone wants to stay on unemployment because it's eventually going to run out. But I do think that as we move forward here in the coming months, between the vaccines and getting this virus under control all across this country, that's the most important thing. You know, I would love to open our economy back up and get people back into work. I think most people want to get back to work at this point, but I think we still have to take a day at a time approach here. But I'm hoping that next time when we have the next budget hearing, which I think is in about a month, I'm hoping we're in a whole different place when it comes to coronavirus, and we're talking about different things.
I appreciate that. You had an OIG report from back last October. State cited vulnerabilities in detecting fraud while complying with CARES Act UI program self-certification requirement. 53% of respondents cited fraud vulnerabilities within the PUA program, and that self-certification requirement was the top fraud vulnerability. And they issued another report in February of this year that identified $5.4 billion of potentially fraudulent UI benefits paid to multi-state claimants, deceased individuals, federal prisoners, and those with suspicious email accounts. And can you update us on?
Congressman, you froze there. Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Okay.
You froze. My screen froze
I
on you.
apologize, Madam Chair, with some with your
Right.
indulgence. I'm just following up on an OIG report that identified $5 billion of potentially fraudulent UI benefits paid.
Now, I understand. I understand that time has expired, so I'll have a brief answer because we have been delayed and there are other folks who are in the queue. So we cannot hear you.
Congressman, if you want to get me, if you can, I can't hear you, but if you can hear me, if you want to get us the question, I'll do that. But $300 billion. All right. Never mind.
I understand.
Congressman Klein, I'm hoping that you and the secretary can address this offline because we need to move on. Congresswoman Bustos is recognized.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And welcome, Secretary Walsh. It's good to see you. I wanted to ask you about something in President Biden's American Jobs Plan. So he's got $40 billion that's included for a new dislocated worker training program. Was really, really excited to see that. I believe also that we need to do more to help dislocated workers find good quality jobs, including those who are displaced by technological advancement. So in my own home state of Illinois, there's a study from Ball State that showed between 50 and 60% of jobs in Illinois could be at risk of becoming automated. Pretty alarming. And then you've got COVID-19 that's accelerated these trends. You've got 43% of businesses that anticipate reducing their workforce due to increased technological integration. So I introduced a bill very recently called the Investing in Tomorrow's Workforce Act. And what the bill would do is create a Department of Labor grant program to work that would support industry partnerships in developing training programs for workers who are likely to become dislocated because of advances in technology. So we're pretty proud of that bill. So Mr. Secretary, what I'm wondering is if you have a thought on the level of investment that we should put into dislocated worker programs in this coming fiscal year. And then kind of the part B of that is how else we can support workers who are displaced by technological advancements. So if you could talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Sorry. Thank you, Congresswoman. I don't know if I got myself in trouble now with the chair. One thing that I've said this already today, with the pandemic has certainly put a spotlight on dislocated workers in industries that might not come back. You're absolutely right to think about some of the manufacturing and technology jobs that we have in America that could be eliminated. And I think what we have to do, and your bill is a good part of that, we have to get ahead of the curve. And the $40 billion investment, we need to get it out in the street. And we need to come up with, somebody asked me a question earlier, we need to have a good process to be able to get ahead of the situation, not react when a plant shuts down and not react when a pandemic hits. We need to have this groundwork down there now to think about what are the jobs of the future, and how can we have people that we know that potentially in the next 5-10 years could be dislocated because of technology changes. How do we train them? So I look forward to working with Congress on this. I look forward to working with you on this. And I think that it's really important. And also the ETA, the National Dislocated Worker Grants, we were able to, the department has awarded $400 million $400 million already in dislocated worker grants money. So we have to get the money out to the systems, out to the states sooner, and not have it sitting in a bank somewhere when it needs to be out in the street in these programs, retraining workers.
Absolutely. I'm glad I've got a little bit of extra time. I want to shift gears a little bit. Also very happy to see President Biden's commitment to green jobs. We've got, there's provisions in a bill that we have. It's called the SCALE Act. It stands for Storing CO2 and Lowering Emissions Act, that President Biden has included as part of the American Jobs Plan. So the bill that I introduced with a group of bipartisan colleagues, we always like to be able to say that, but it would provide funding for CO2 transport infrastructure and storage. And then in addition, the bill would help create jobs in various places, but I'm very happy that it would create jobs in the congressional district that I serve, including in rural communities. We've got a plan where we can transport and store CO2 at the Mount Simon Sandstone Basin in my home state. So, Mr. Secretary, how could investment in clean energy jobs help bolster our economy, including in rural America and the Midwest, if you can kind of focus on that component of it in rural America?
Yeah, some of the questions I got earlier about fossil fuels, Keystone Pipeline, how do we move forward here? There are many workers in rural America that have worked in different industries that aren't necessarily as strong as they were, and they're concerned about what's going to happen to these industries over the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe even before that. So I think that, like we did with the Veterans Program, we created a program that was a competitive grant program prepared for eligible veterans, transitioning service members, military spouses for careers in the clean energy sector. There is no reason why we can't be targeting areas of this country the same way and targeting it with these types of grants to be able to make sure that a city or a town that might have had whatever it was in the town that we know is going away, why we can't focus again and get in there the day before. Because if we wait for the day after, then we know what happens to the city and town if they lose an industry. People have to move and leave, and areas become depressed. So I do think that we have to do, when I say we, the government, but I'll say the DOL right now, have to do a better job of working with members of Congress to target the areas that need the investment.
Well, please see me as your partner in this, Mr. Secretary. We're out of time. I yield back. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Congresswoman Watson-Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, and it is good to see you face to face, Secretary Walsh. Thank you for the conversation that we had the other day. I have another hearing that I have to go to, and I had a million questions to ask. So I'm going to run through some stuff really quickly and then just kind of ask you, can we work on these things together? First of all, let me just say it's good to have a Secretary of Labor that believes in the importance of labor and unions. Among my priorities are federal jobs guarantee programs, guaranteed income, living wages, and eradicating discrimination in the workplace. I want us to always be focused on the fact that the minimum wage is a minimum wage, and for those individuals who work in those tip type jobs that they deserve a minimum wage, and if their service is good enough that their customer gives them a tip, all well and good, because we're trying to build back better and stronger in our economy. I want to look forward to working with you. I'm very much concerned about the fact that, first of all, let me just say that I am encouraged by the president's government holistic approach to equity and opportunities, fairness and justice. And I just need to let you know that I've worked under those environments before, but at the end of the day, those who were minority communities and those who were women still got left out. And I want to make sure that when we build back better and bigger this time, that that's not the case. So I'm very interested in how your department will hold entities who are responsible for pre-apprenticeship programs, apprenticeship programs, training programs, and jobs programs, not only have high expectations and have the resources to do things, but how will they be held accountable by your department, whether or not it is to hold the state accountable or others, and what do you envision as potential consequences of not doing everything that you can to ensure that minorities and women are utilized in the workforce to the degree that they're available, because their workforce availability is crucial when we determine whether or not we're measuring those standards. I'm concerned about the elimination of discrimination. I am the sponsor of the Crown Act, which makes it illegal to discriminate against someone because of the way they wear their hair, particularly the sort of ethnic expressions that are manifested in their hairstyles. The Department of Labor has the Secretary of Labor is the actual enforcement agent for that law, and I hope that you'll be able to work with us on that. I'm also very concerned about reentry programs, second chance programs, youth programs. What are you looking forward to in terms of giving those individuals, those formerly incarcerated individuals, and those individuals who are most vulnerable to incarceration, because there haven't been these alternatives to incarceration programs, opportunities, so that they can become productive workers? I think that when we look to make sure that we're holding up and protecting and ensuring opportunities from training to working happens for those who've been most underrepresented in the workforce, and that's minorities, Black and Latino in particular, and women, Black and Latino in particular, and even white women, then we're really building back bigger and better. And so I really am interested in just kind of how you see your role in supporting the states and the programs and holding them accountable to do what it is the president envisioned. And I also want to put a pitch in for my Department of Labor, which is overwhelmed by so many cases that their people have months and months before they get a response. What can we do to alleviate some of that backlog?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for that. And there's a lot there, and everything you said, I've worked on or supported in my entire time. But I just want to kind of quickly say that we are 21 years into the 21st century. And the fact that we're still talking about the issues of racism, discrimination, inequality, inequity for our country, as the United States, is somewhat a very sad story. And all I can say is that we have an administration in Washington right now. We have a president in President Biden and a vice president and Vice President Harris that are not afraid to put these policies embedded in, whether it's the rescue plan, the jobs plan, the families plan, or just talk about it on a daily basis. So I just want you to know you have my commitment, and I know the team that works with me every day that I've met in a very short period of time, both the career staff and the political staff. We are focused and dedicated to the Department of Labor to tackle every single issue you brought up. And I could rattle off a whole bunch of things we've already done, but we will have other conversations. So I want to thank you for bringing it to the forefront today.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you. And Mr. Secretary, the one thing I also would like to suggest is that we eliminate any discussion on non-traditional work environments for women, because I think that's an overused, outdated term. We can do just about anything other than the few biological things that only men can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Well said, Congresswoman Watson Coleman. Congressman Harder.
Thank you so much, Chair DeLauro, for hosting today's hearing, and thank you, Secretary Walsh, for being here. For over a year, I've been very focused on some of the ongoing problems at the Employment Development Department in California, EDD. I'll just come out and say it. I think EDD has been a complete disaster, a total and complete mess. Many of those problems preceding the last year. It's supposed to be the last resort for a lot of folks before hunger and homelessness, yet it's totally failed to do its job. Fewer than 10% of calls to EDD in California actually get a human response at all. Tax forms are going to folks who never got a dime in unemployment. And of course, criminals have stolen more than $11 billion through fraudulent claims. Just to make this personal, I sat recently with a mom of 2 kids who said she called EDD 100 times a day after they shut off her benefits, and she still couldn't get through to a live person, even after 6 weeks of calling them up to 100 times a day. They need the money to support her kids, and yet the system let her down. 2 months ago, we voted to pass the rescue plan, which gave $2 billion in funding to EDD to help fix this disaster in California and many other states. It was supposed to go to preventing fraud and ensuring families get their payment quickly. It's my understanding that none of that $2 billion has gone out the door yet. Secretary Walsh, I know you don't have the power to single-handedly fix the disaster that is the California Unemployment Office, but when can states expect these funds we passed 2 months ago, and what's the plan to get them out ASAP?
Yeah, no, we want to get the funds out the door as quickly as possible, and we're working right now. There's a proposal, setting up a grant proposal that we're doing, a structure, I should say, not proposal. It is a large amount of money, as I mentioned earlier. About, I think, little less than half of it's going to go for technical support, and other money is going to go for other supports that we have to do. So we want to be very intentional about making sure when this money goes out, it's meant for what you voted for, to change the systems. And I know that you have concerns in your system, in your state, and other states have concerns, maybe different concerns in their states. But there's probably not many states in the country that don't have some type of concern around their whole system. So we are working to get that out, and I will keep you abreast to as soon as we get it out the door, or get it proposed to get out the door.
Please do. Do you have a sense of the timeline? I mean, how long do you think it might take until some of these funds are available?
No, I don't want to put a timeline on it at this point, because I know there are people as we speak right now in this hearing, there are people working on it here, and I'd want to ask them what would there be their hopefulness to get it out quickly.
Great. Next question. I hate to be cynical, but I think we've seen organizations like EDD get more cash again and again, but it doesn't seem to make the situation any better. So my next question is, what does the oversight look like? How are we going to ensure these funds are actually put to good use instead of thrown out the window like we've seen happen historically with unemployment offices like California? And what do you think the Department of Labor's use of that oversight is going to look like in the future?
No, thank you, Congressman. You're absolutely right in that, and I think that, as I said earlier, we've had a couple periods in the 21st century that we've had large groups of people on unemployment, and we've had concerns in those unemployment. The pandemic has given us all an opportunity to really look at, put a spotlight on the system. Some of that spotlight shows a good part of the system where somebody gets a check in their home and they can put food on the table, and some of the spotlight is that it wasn't great, and whether it was fraud or not being able to get through to the office in different states, things like that. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us. The $2 billion investment is not a small investment. I think the American people, it's their money, it's their taxpayers' dollars. You appropriate it, you voted for it, and I think that we owe the American people a good policy and a good process that somebody 10 years from now, Secretary of Labor and a congressman from your district having conversations about, 10 years ago they blew it. We have an opportunity to do it right, and I think we need to.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, unfortunately, it often feels like Groundhog Day, where every single economic crisis, we have the same conversation about how broken our unemployment system is. And I guess my question for you is, how are we going to know if we fix it as we emerge sort of out of the other end of this tunnel, as people are getting back to work and the demands on our unemployment office are hopefully diminished? 6 months from now, after this money has gone out, what are you going to be looking at from the Department of Labor to see whether or not we're actually on track to getting this right for the next economic crisis that could be down the road?
Well, I can't speak to what the relationship was in the past, but we're going to work closely with states and territories to stay connected with them to see what's working, what's not working. We're also going to be talking to governors and mayors around the country to see what they're hearing. I mean, one thing, the way you can tell if it's fixed is the way people are treated on unemployment. If they need unemployment benefits, they apply, they get them, and when they don't need them anymore, they don't get them. And I think it's really listening to people. It's listening to the public. I was a mayor. I wasn't the governor. I heard every single day about somebody waiting to get unemployment benefits. Now the concerns weren't as great as some other states in the country, but they were concerned. They called their mayor. They called my office. They called their local elected officials. And I think that's going to be, number one, the benchmark. But two, the Department of Labor, needs to put a process, a check and balance in place so that we can monitor these systems across the country to make sure they're working. Because again, a $2 billion investment, and then I think we're asking for another $100 million in this budget. That's a large investment to make in a UI system and get nothing back for it. Maybe the investments made in the past, I'm not sure what they were, but I can guarantee you we're going to do everything we can to make sure the system is, I don't want to say fixed, the system is a better system moving forward.
I look forward to working with you. Thank you so much. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Yes, Congresswoman Lawrence.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to say congratulations to you, Secretary Wells, and we have not had the opportunity to have that one-on-one, and I look forward to that. Being a former mayor, I wanted to bring forth the issue that I appreciate your understanding of the intersection of all of the funding that we are talking about, the Jobs Act, the transportation funding that we're talking about. If we do not grab hold to all of these fundings and to ensure that all ships rise during this, I wanted to quote James Clyburn, who made an amazing statement to me. He said, when we were meeting with the president, the New Deal was the transformational moment in American history, but it left pockets of poverty all over this country. And we have an opportunity to ensure that as we infuse the much needed funding and resources to rebuild better, that we are doing it so all ships rise. So with that, I am the chair of the Women's Caucus co-chair. I am the vice chair of the Black Caucus, and I'm also the co-chair of the Bipartisan Skilled Trade Workforce Caucus. With that being said, I'm very interested because I believe your money speaks louder than what you say, the budget. So I want to talk about the women in apprenticeship and non-traditional occupations, the WANTO. Now, it has been underfunded. It has not been funded in a way that it could be transformational. And so I wanted to know, what is your plan to fund that and to energize that department so that when we look at these construction sites in our cities, that it look like the people who work there?
Well, thank you very much. First and foremost, I appreciate the question about the funding and increasing the funding, but we also have to increase the access to these programs. When I ran the building trades, I helped create a program called Building Pathways. It was a pre-apprentice program. The trade stepped up and was guaranteed admittance into the union. And the second cycle of Building Pathways, the third cycle of Building Pathways training apprentices was a class of all women. It was probably the first time in this country that we had 12 women, I think it was 12 or 13 women in apprenticeship class, pre-apprentice class to get into the building trades. And we have to create those opportunities to get in. So it's not just simply, and I'm not putting this down, not simply about the money training, but how do we build up a network around the country? The Women's Bureau has already reached out to. I know in Massachusetts and in Boston, we have women in the trades chapter. And we need to collaborate and partner with those different associations around the country so that we get the grants around the country and we create opportunities and pathways into the building trade is one aspect. There's other aspects as well. In my city, in our police class, the last class we just put on before I left as mayor, I want to say 32% of the people in the class were women. We have to create opportunities so women have opportunities into good paying jobs that have been historically, traditionally labeled a man's job, which today, as the previous Congresswoman said, doesn't exist anymore. So I think that we need to do more work around advocacy and recruitment and advocacy.
I thank you for that. And I want you to know that the funding of that, and I would love to get a briefing with the Women's Caucus on what your plans are and how we can work with you on the WANTO program and also on the Skilled Trade Caucus. And know that you have an advocate. You've heard from all of us the issue of minorities and women. If we cannot build back better unless we build back with women, we cannot build back better unless our workforce is reflective of this amazing diversity we have in our country.
No, thank you. And I had a conversation with Congresswoman Frankel the other day, and I did say that I would love to present in front of the Women's Caucus, as well as bring in the Women's Bureau in front of the Women's Caucus to have these conversations so that we're not just having a conversation and we're talking, you're saying to me, we want to do this, and we're like, yeah, we're going to, it doesn't happen. I want to actually roll our sleeves up and actually get some work done.
Okay, thank you very much. And I look forward to having my one-on-one with you as well. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just to follow up very briefly on what my colleague just talked about, Mr. Secretary, and I'll be quite honest with you, almost every year, and that's true whether it's been a Republican or a Democratic administration, we have had to, and I say we and I have had to, as chair of this subcommittee, really lobby, fight hard for increased funding. In some respects, it may have even been eliminated, both for the Women's Bureau and for the WANTO program. These are critical programs, and I'm hopeful when we do see the president's budget that there will be a significant increase in this area, particularly as we face a situation with, close to 4 million women are out of jobs. And as you pointed out, as I pointed out, women are not opting out of the workplace; they're being pushed out of the workplace. So, look forward to working with you on that. And let me just say to my colleague, Congressman Harris, I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Congresswoman Lucia Roybal-Allard, who is chairing the Homeland Security meeting. But I will, before we begin to wrap up and close, Congressman Harris, I want to give you an opportunity to be able to ask another question as well. On behalf of Congressman Roybal-Allard, Mr. Secretary, and I concur overwhelmingly with her that one of the disgraceful things that happens in this country is that children who work in agriculture are not protected under the same labor laws as children in every other industry. There was a recent GAO report found that over 50% of all work-related child fatalities occur in the agriculture industry. Since 2001, Congresswoman Roybal-Allard has a bill, the CARE Act, amends the Fair Labor Standards Act, correct the inequities in current law, allow children employed in agriculture, that allow children to work longer hours at younger ages and more hazardous conditions than children working in other sectors. Her bill preserves the family farm exemption, sets standards for the ag industry, strengthens provisions on pesticides, etc. And I'm going to be very honest, there's never been any movement in either Republican or Democratic run Congresses to fix the double standard in child labor protections. What are you going to be able to do to protect these children in the agriculture sector, Mr. Secretary? And the GAO child labor report from 2018 found that agriculture ranks much lower as a sector in the number of wage and hour investigations, that lead to violations. Will the department seek a new, comprehensive child labor enforcement strategy that better aligns investigations with fatal occupational injuries?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. That is an important issue. And as we move forward here, I'll be happy to work with the Congresswoman on this issue and to see how her bill would interact with some of the work here at the Department of Labor.
Mm-hmm.
And on your previous point, just for the record, I've asked for a couple of $1 million additional to be put into the Women's Bureau on top of what we've asked. So this is off of my first couple of meetings with the Women's Bureau. We have a great director there and a great staff there, a great team there, I should say. And I look forward to working with them. So I'm excited about working with them as well on other issues that we talked about today and in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I think it's critically important right now. And I understand that Congressman Harris has left. Let me just, and I will close in a second, but I want to, and if you can get back to me on this, with regard to the IRAPs, the Biden administration has called for an end to IRAPs. They've done that through an executive order, but the authority for the IRAP model still exists. We need to know, and I want to know, the steps that you are going to take to rescind the authority for the IRAP rule. And how will you ensure that federal funding is not used for this purpose?
Thank you. As you mentioned, the president did issue an executive order asking the department to consider taking steps to rescind the regulations. Our review is currently ongoing right now. I want to reiterate the commitment I made during my confirmation process that we will ensure that every voice of the industries are heard. And to that end, the rulemaking that we do with regards to IRAP will be transparent and go through a public notice and comment period. So we're working through that process now.
Okay. And we will continue to pursue registered apprenticeships.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Also, and we didn't get much chance to talk about wage theft, but we'll proceed with a question on that because we both know that is rampant and that workers really suffer. I just have, again, before I close, and this is, really need to get answers on this. This is about ILAB and the USMCA funding. This is about democracy in Mexico. We provided $180 million to ILAB, supporting reforms for the labor justice system in Mexico, funds for worker capacity, to train workers, to build independent unions. Mexico, even after the passage of their reforms, employers are signing the protection contracts that don't represent workers' interests. Alarming reports on intimidation, harassment, incarceration of union organizers. And what I'm asking DOL is to dedicate more of its USMCA resources to support Mexican workers' efforts to build independent and democratic unions. I don't know what your plan is, which I very much like to see, of how you are going to monitor, enforce the capacity building role in the USMCA and address the concerns that have been raised in Mexico. And with regard to that as well, the funding for the Mexican Labor Inspectorate. It's an important role in protecting Mexican worker rights. It enforces the labor laws, supports new labor justice institutions. Since 1919, its budget has been cut by roughly 40%. It impacts operations and efficacy. So again, will the administration be raising the concern with the appropriate Mexican budget authorities to help ensure that the Labor Inspectorate gets sufficient funding?
The short answer to that is absolutely yes. And just ILAB, we've already awarded $80 million for projects to support labor reforms in Mexico, strengthening the democratic union process, reducing workforce discrimination and addressing child labor, and forced labor and human trafficking. And we also, I had a conversation the other day with our team about making sure that the 5 inspectors that were supposed to be hired, we get them on the ground there and we move forward with that. So this is a fluid process, but the short answer to your question, the initial question is yes, we'll do everything we can.
Well, what I'd like to do is to work with you and with your team on this issue. I was part of the working group that the speaker stood up in terms of the renegotiated NAFTA agreement, and someone in the past who did not support the TPP, and because of the outsourcing of jobs and other agreements which have outsourced the jobs. But we had assurances that the Mexican reforms were going to be transformative. And thus far, that is not the case. So I very, very much want to work closely with you in seeing that they are held to the standards that were laid out. And I was in Mexico and discussing with the president these issues, the president of Mexico, and that what we need to do is to make sure that workers, and I know where your heart is on where workers, workers' rights, that those rights are adhered to, and that the Mexican labor has the opportunity to be able to have independent unions where they can bargain for wages and safe workplaces. So it's a critically important area, Mr. Secretary. So look forward to that conversation. Okay.
No, thank you. We have a really strong team at iLab as well, so I'll make sure that they stay connected to your office as we move forward here. Actually, as a matter of fact, while I have a moment, we have a strong team at DOL completely, and I want to thank them for the incredible work they've done. The career people in particular for all the great work they've done over the last 4 years here, keeping the ship moving forward, and also the political people that are coming in, the dedication. So I am fortunate and blessed to have such great people work with me every single day. Many who I haven't met yet because of coronavirus, but the work still continues. So I just want to give a shout out to the team at DOL for the great work they do.
Thank you. And in the past, DOL has not had anywhere near the resources that it needs. We've tried to address that in the Labor Age Committee over the years, and now, so it's critically important to see what the Biden administration has done here, and so pleased with the budget for labor. This is strong funding increases for worker protection, job training, apprenticeships. We talked about community colleges and so many other areas. I view what you are doing as central to addressing the issues that workers in this country have faced, particularly they have in the past, but particularly as a result of the pandemic. And they need your strength and the strength of your team to help them get back on track. Let me reiterate my strong support for OSHA, and we move forward with the emergency temporary standard to protect workers. I think that we are moving to a government that invests in workers and puts workers and their families ahead of corporate profits in this country. So it's so good to see a tilt in that direction. This is from my personal perspective. And it's all about what your immigrant parents and what my immigrant parents strove for. And that was their children to be able to get a shot at the American dream. We are both in positions where we can help to make that happen. And I know your commitment in this effort. And the other piece of this is poverty is unacceptable, and we have the capacity to abolish it. And Robert Kennedy said that in a land of plenty, poverty is evil. The United States is a land of plenty. So again, look forward to working with you as we try to turn some of these things around. Thank you so much, and your patience with regard to our delay and so forth. I thank you for your testimony today. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.